Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundless success to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Correll. I'm here with my partner in empowerment, Jan Jeremias. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you one of Jan's friends who's fast becoming one of mine. A perfect name for this show. His name is Seamus Power, who is also sitting in Dublin, Ireland, right at the moment. And I'm sure that the whole world right now is looking for a little bit more empowerment, aren't they, Seamus?
Absolutely, Bill. I'm delighted to be here as well. So thanks for having me, and thanks to Jan for making the introduction as well. So yeah, I mean that's one thing certainly that the world could do with like personal empowerment and people operating from the power we all have within ourselves, that authentic power. So hopefully we can talk a bit about that. I guess.
Absolutely. I think the other thing I'd just like to mention from the start here is Jan has collaborated with I believe four other writers who have produced a new book, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit, and maybe to share some stories about yourself and your contribution to the book, Seamus. In the meantime, I would like to invite everybody who's listening right now to stop what you're doing for just a little bit of time and give us your undivided attention, because there may be something that's terribly useful here for you, or maybe it won't be useful at all, but I have a feeling you'll have a good time listening to us. So let's move on to what's the main thing for you right now, Seamus?
Relationship with self and honoring yourself. I mean, that's it. I've come from a space where I didn't do that for a long time. And now I've come through personal experience to realize the simplicity, but the difficulty of honoring, truly honoring who you are. Like, and that's my fuel. That's what keeps me going every day now, and keeps me refreshed and allows me to kind of experiencing the liberation of I'm
Yes.
good enough just as I am. I think there's a lot of space for that in the world, for people who are very harsh on themselves in a very difficult environment where we create and compare and create all sorts of barriers for ourselves through comparisons and through what I personally felt at a very young age of not being good enough.
I hear that a lot from people, Seamus. And we were talking off air. You thought it might have something to do with being the youngest of seven. Well, I was
Mm,
the oldest of six, and
okay.
I was not spared. Okay, I think what happens in life is that everybody gets an opportunity to fail, and what typically happens is they don't develop a great relationship with failure, realizing that the failure is actually the dues for success. And
Mm,
there is no way to get to success until you've failed enough times and have that feeling in the pit of your stomach. I like to call that fire in the belly,
mm.
that you are enough, and all you need to do is to show up in life and be competent.
Yeah, and that whole idea of that word failure as well, even labeling something as failure, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It kind of sets the tone for this is something to be avoided, something not to embrace. You know what I mean? If we could call failure success, it would be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and the neat part of it is that the people who have learned early on that getting things wrong is where the
Mm,
learning takes place, and getting things right is pretty much the booby prize, because there's no change made to you. There's nothing to
yeah.
learn. There's nothing to, to add to your body of knowledge.
Mm,
And I think, what's kind of neat is this conversation stretches across all walks of life, whether it has to do with athletics, or it has to do with career, or it has something to do with academics, or wherever there's an opportunity to be caught in that kind of vortex of unconscious comparison. I like
mm.
what you said. And we come by that honestly in our cultures. And your culture and my culture is very similar compared to some other cultures around the world.
Oh yeah, I mean, even the study I've done, like I studied, like I started my career with IT, but like during the study and during like personal experience journey, but this whole idea of culture differences, and again, I came across this. I was in a global role in the IT company I worked with, and the comparisons between the Asian culture of family and community, and the Western idea of individualistic kind of competitive culture, like it, it's so harsh, um, the way that individualistic culture can kind of lead a person to lose themselves, basically, because you're spending so much time in the competitive world of being someone else.
Yes.
You don't have the nurturing experience in the Asian cultures of the family, which is very important to what's going on in your life. You know what I mean? And I think that's a key learning, I think, is how we learn from the Asian cultures of having a solid connection to loved ones around us, beginning with family, but to everyone that we engage with outside that, as a foundation for how we show up for ourselves, and how we value ourselves, and how out of that valuing we value others, and learn to kind of respect others the same as we would respect ourselves. And when we don't not respecting ourselves, I think it's very difficult to respect others as well, because you're in this external world of comparison, rather than coming from that place of honoring that comes only really authentically when you allow yourself. And that's my own personal experience of the power of honoring yourself. It's a game changer, really, because you leave that world of comparison and you come back to that world of love, I suppose, which is really a foundational force that it's uncomparable, really. I think.
I love what you just did there. You completely identified and outlined a formula that you've come across that seems to make sense to you. I could actually see you in the air between us creating the bullet points: step one, step two, step three, step four. And what I really appreciate and liked about what you had to say was the involvement of yourself.
Mm.
And also, I took from it like an inference that yourself was probably one of the hardest things to learn, or to get to be comfortable with, in order for you to kind of move along in that process, to be where you're at a stage where you can exhale and you can say, yes, I am enough.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And it's amazing because it kind of comes back to, like, there's a beautiful book from Bruce Lipton called The Biology of Belief, which kind of is one of my favorite books. And it was a key trigger point for me on my journey from IT into psychology. And one of the key words he talked about was environment. And he was a cell biologist, and it was clear to him, the environment is everything. And
Yeah.
again, I was in a beautiful family environment, so again, I had all the nourishment there I needed. But it's funny how still from that environment, with the environment within myself, somehow wasn't being nourished, and it had a big impact in the way I was not honoring myself, despite the fact that the petri dish around me, let's say, was full of love and full of joy most of the time. But it's the funny thing that even a small thing like a sibling maybe telling me you're stupid lands, and that it's an amazing, despite all the positive impacts of the environment that I was in, it just takes a small throwaway comment once or twice to actually label you as not being good enough, or being stupid, or whatever. And that's an amazing feature of human experience, I think, that an ill thought comment from someone close to you can have a long lasting impact on who and how you relate to yourself and how
Yeah.
you label yourself. And that was a key learning point for me in my own life. And it took me maybe 30 years to realize and, really appreciate that lesson, because I accepted and owned the label I was given rather than truly knowing that, I wasn't stupid or I wasn't less than. And this is what's come through, working with Jan, writing with Jan, having many conversations with Jan around you getting to the point where, yeah, do you know what? You can make sense of something you couldn't make sense of before.
Makes all the sense in the world. And Jan, as your name was invoked 3 times in a single sentence, I think it's now your turn to maybe do a little bit of an introduction. Like, how did you meet Seamus? What was it that attracted the two of you together? Because you meet lots of people. Some stick around and some don't.
Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly how we met. I mean, I know we met through Hans Parge, but I don't know in what sort of platform kind of thing we met. But I think that Seamus's, a lot of what Seamus talks about, which was leading from the heart, was very much who I am. And so I think that was part of that initial sort of attraction, so to speak, of realizing that there are other people out there in the world who shared some of those common feelings of like, as opposed to being someone who had sort of navigated my life through my head. It's just such a great extent, very, in that analytical space of now getting in touch with my heart, of meeting somebody else who seemed to be navigating the world from his heart was very refreshing and kind of nice to experience and to come into contact with him. And then it just evolved, the book and, meeting each week. And, I did some coaching with Seamus for a while. And that was truly an unbelievable experience. And so, but a few things as Seamus and you were speaking that I think one of the things is in the last kind of thing was about shame was those beliefs we take on, is like we take them on and we wear them as like, it's like we put on clothing that's not really ours, and we kind of wear that clothing. And then when he was talking about was this idea of all of a sudden you get to a certain point and maybe it's a certain age or maybe something happens when you start to question those things. You're like, you own them and you're like, well, why do I actually wear that?
Mm.
And it's all of a sudden, maybe through conversations and through listening to things or reading things or whatever avenue you get insight from or different ideas from, all of a sudden you sit there and you think to yourself, like, why do I believe that? Or what is that about? And all of a sudden you start to ask these questions and realize that, and sometimes you're like, well, I don't really know why I took that on. Like, I have no idea. And that really doesn't make any sense, but it's starting to question and really tweak out what is, how have I been navigating my life and what are like, how and why do I believe this about myself?
Yeah,
I
it's
think
it's a lot about using the wrong map. And quite frankly, the people that are giving you the instructions about the map are the last thing on their mind is you.
mm,
They're really, I mean, coming from a family with 6 kids, there was a lot of competition for parents' time and
mm,
attention. And some people did it through excellence. Some did it through acting out. And then some did it by being really quiet and reserved to themselves. In our family, our baby sister was spoiled rotten, Seamus. So
mm.
I really feel badly that you didn't have that experience. Although I think if you were to ask your older siblings, that some of them would tell you that you had it much better than they did, especially
Of
the older
course,
ones.
yeah, no doubt about that. Yeah, I mean, I'm still at 59 years of age called a pet still.
Yeah.
So I am the special one in my family, according to the perspective of other people in my family. But yeah, I get that completely.
And I'm
Rest
the
my case,
youngest,
Honor. Yeah.
and I'm the youngest and the only girl, so I get it.
Yeah.
So but still, we all have the way we navigate the world and the way, like you said, those comments that come, whether it be in school from other kids or siblings, that we kind of own, and, I was a really overweight young person. Um, And so, I mean, I still can hear my brothers calling me, fat and, all these
Mm.
nicknames and stuff, which I still, and now I'm probably, probably weigh the same weight I now do as an adult as a kid, but I did as a kid. But still, those labels, they kind of like every now and then in my head, I'll be like, when they kind of pop in and we take them on.
But I think what you mentioned there, what was coming to mind as you were speaking about the power of beliefs, John, brought me back to Lipton again, and
Mhm.
why Lipton has played such a big part in my life, because he challenged the dogma of the beliefs, and he kind of invited me to and he did this through personal experience. He challenged the dogma of the medical education system around like the genetics are decide and define who you are. And he challenged that and said, no, it's not. It's how you what your beliefs are plays such a huge role in you becoming the person you truly are. And these labels and how we come to believe what we're told when we're young children by influential people in the environment around us,
Yeah.
those beliefs, you touched on it there, I think, and it's fundamental. It comes up in the book as well. It is that it's a major breakthrough when you feel you can actually open to challenging the beliefs that you felt are could not be challenged.
Yeah.
I felt I couldn't challenge that I'm less than or I'm not good enough. But when I actually began through Lipton to challenge the dogma and the strength of that belief, that's a game changer, basically. You know what I mean? And I think that is an expression and an example of the power of beliefs. Uh, and beliefs, that's the negative power of beliefs, like how beliefs can be so restrictive. But then there's the other side of that, the other side of the kind of beliefs. When you go in and allow yourself and create your own authentic beliefs from the inside as an
Mhm.
antidote to kind of the beliefs that were labels that you kind of own and associated with the thoughts and opinions and perspectives of others. I think that then switches the power of beliefs back into when you can actually begin to honor yourself and believe and understand and know, and take on an alternative set of beliefs that are more aligned with you and what your true spirit is and your true value. And when you're operating from that space, that is my personal experience of shifting from a place of owning beliefs that are not yours to actually operating from a space of owning beliefs that are completely yours. And it is a game changer,
Mhm. I think the other thing that happens is sometimes reframing that, whatever that belief was. Like for me, I was always told I was too sensitive. Uh, you
Mm,
know, and then all of a sudden shifting and realizing that that sensitivity allowed me in a lot of ways to navigate, like to be the kind of person I am, which is, like that very caring, very concerned type of person came from that. And so it
mm,
really wasn't, it was when it was delivered, it wasn't delivered in a kind and kind of this is a strength kind of way. But I've realized that, you know, I'm really happy I'm sensitive, like that's
yeah,
like
yeah.
a real strength that I have. So it's sometimes doing that is kind of looking at the delivery. Like I don't really think it was meant to be, it wasn't at all meant to be kind when they told me that. But I've really taken it on as being something that I really value about myself.
Mm,
What's interesting to me, hearing both of you, um, I'm hearing that after transformation, it's almost impossible to remember what it was like before. And I want to submit to you that there was a period of your life where these were undistinguished parts of who you knew you were. They were not beliefs, they were not identifiable as a thing. It's just like how it is in the world. And when you get to the point later on, and it sounds like the light came on for you, Seamus, when you read this work and basically said, do you realize that some of the things that you've been saying about yourself in those 80,000 thoughts a day, they're neither true nor are they correct? And here's your
mm,
opportunity to examine them. And once you're awakened, to that opportunity to distinguish the undistinguishable prior to that,
mm.
now you have access to, well, look, we can set that one aside and test it. Am I stupid? Well, let me see. I've got a pretty darn good job. People tend to go along with what I tell them is a good idea, and then they execute on it and make it happen better than my dreams.
Mm,
All
mm,
those things where all those sentences that have been placed there indiscriminately and uncaringly by other people who are so-called friends and loved ones.
mm,
And for the most part, all they're trying to do is to manipulate and dominate you in a moment. It's not about changing your mind about yourself or creating a substandard human being that will go through life going, I will never be a winner. I am just not that guy. It's more about gaslighting you in a moment to get a piece of candy or to convince you that when they have 10 cents and you have $1.10, if you put it together and split it, it's a good deal for you. Okay.
yes.
So what it all comes down to is that at some point, I call it the age of awareness and awakening, and that's caused very different ways by many different people. And for me, I went to this thing called the Landmark Forum, where I
Mm,
really had an opportunity to be quiet for a little while and listen to myself listen, which is really, there's a technique that goes on there. When you hear your thoughts, the ones while you're busy doing something really important and it's distracting you with something that has nothing to do with that at all, you can then have a conversation with that thought and you can say, I got it. You're going to be
mm,
here for a while. Would you do me a favor? I'm kind of busy at the moment. Go sit in the corner. I do know you'll remind me later on, but right now I'm trying to put a fire out, and thank you for sharing, but please out of the way.
mhm,
And over time, the technique starts to work and becomes a habit. It's a new habit to listen for where you're breaking yourself down and finding fault in a situation where there really is no fault to be found. There are people who actually invent the hardest way to do everything, you know? And to that end, a lot of people experience a life where they're trying to be perfect, but they don't
mm,
realize that perfection is really another form of procrastination. It's
mm,
putting off what you know needs to be done because it's not the right time or something like that. So, what I'm hearing, I think we all arrived at a different way at different times in our life, but it's a very freeing experience to be able to stand and hear somebody say something that you know is not true, couldn't be further from the truth, not something you're going to own. And when you have the intestinal fortitude to stand in there and not respond to it,
mm, mm,
just let it go by. Don't catch it. Just let it go by. They will
mm,
not be here in 5 minutes. And then my life will be back to having the best day ever.
mm. Yeah, and that takes a lot of fortitude, and I think this comes back to like a book John shared with me recently as well, like Jack Cornfield, but he really emphasized the idea of becoming the observer. Like it speaks to just what you're describing there, of being able to stand back. And identity is another word that comes up, I think, for me. I had been thinking about, but came up in that book as well, like The Wise Heart. It was around the whole idea of we identify with this the ego, the me, the identity that I assume in different situations, like the father, the son, the leader, the whatever. You know what I mean? And when you begin to kind of create that space that you described it there, to kind of become an observer and step back and operate from the foundation of who you truly are, like the observer you, who can sit beneath and see all this other crap that's going on outside. That again is what was coming to mind as you were describing that, as a process, like of being able to kind of
Mm.
not respond, but just to be able to observe and actually make sense of in the moment what is really going on here, and literally see the bigger picture. I think, and that's a great life skill. I think that would serve you in all aspects, like whether it's at home or in the workplace or in the community, when you are creating space to kind of listen, observe, and engage. Like that engage word is something that Jan and I have spoken about before as well. It invites you to engage with you, with what's going on within you, and also to engage much, much better from that foundation engagement into engaging with what's going on outside as well, you know. So yeah, thanks for that reminder, Bill, because I think it's fundamental really around how we operate and the lessons of life, you know.
I think the neat part of choosing a stoic life is that you can basically say I'm built not like a circle, or I'm not built like a sphere that I can be pushed around and I have to be at the mercy of everyone else. I don't even need to be a cube where, with some effort they can tip me over. I can actually be a pyramid where
Mm.
95% of my balance and my weight is on the ground, and I'm centered.
Mm.
And if that's how you live your life and conduct yourself, you find a lot more things funny than you used to. They're a little more humorous, and some cases hilarious. And it's kind of an interesting thing to be in the middle of people yelling at each other, and all of a sudden you can't hold the laughter back anymore because it's so absurd. You
Mm.
know?
Well, and maybe those people are not other people, but they're yourself. And that's what
Right.
I find. It's like that, where all of a sudden I'll have a thought and I'll be like, really, you're back again? Like, it's almost like this. And then to actually, Seamus's words, to observe like how often, or your too, Bill, how often my mind goes to that place. And then the question is that, how do I recognize or not force that stuff away, but either say, not now, I'm thinking about this and right now you're clouding my concentration or you're distracting me from what's really important here.
Yeah.
And how often do I attach to those thoughts and get pulled down the rabbit hole, so to speak? And for me, one of the most critical things is um, not beating yourself up when you do get attached to it. Like,
Yeah.
that's been a huge practice because it's almost like I think we feel like it needs to be absolute. Like, we're never supposed to have that thought again. And that just doesn't happen. Like, they creep in and different circumstances and different times in your life. All of a sudden, it'll creep in
Yeah.
and you'll be like, okay. And to realize that it's not a major catastrophe if it does, it's not following the trail that it leads you on. Is really, that's to me where the fortitude comes in.
Yeah.
It's like this, the strength to sit there and say, okay, well, you're not true, or to question at that point, but not to get pulled in to a deep dark hole again.
If you stop and think about it, the deck is stacked against us before we're born. So if you're born Jewish, there's a heritage of guilt that is just like what you breathe, and and if you're born Catholic, of course there's the original sin, which no matter what you do for the entirety of your 70 or 80 years on earth, you get up, you do the same thing every day, and then you die. Or if you're Episcopalian, it's a third less guilt, okay? But it's still there. And I have to say that with that as a cultural background that most people are raised into in our neck of the woods, if you will, that's something that's how it is. That your heritage is that somebody died on a cross for you, or didn't die on a cross for you because he wasn't really whatever. But the point is that whatever has happened to you when you didn't deserve it, you now have so much more than anyone else in the world. I can still remember my mother saying at breakfast, I did not like cream of wheat. I really didn't like it. And my mother would say, children in Biafra are starving. And I would say, give me their address. I will send this to them. And so guilt was a big part of the conversation at our home. I think that was part of how she kept six kids, being so young, and didn't graduate from high school by the time she had me. And it kind of got away from her. So she had to use other tactics. And unfortunately, through the rest of her life, she didn't outgrow those tactics. She just became somebody who was a master manipulator, that people actually in her presence were afraid to say anything to her about it, but they were unkind to her when they were beyond, earshot. Uh,
Mm.
and in that way, what she was getting from it is she had she's passed as of 13 years ago. She had a following of people that would show up for her in the world, in anticipation of something really, really great that they all shared that was true. That if my mom was speaking, this is what they would get out of it. And then
Mm.
they would endure an hour and 45 minutes of her just going on and on and on. And at the end of that, they would all kind of say to each other, yeah, that was kind of what we've seen the last 30 or 40 times. And not one of them said, I can't wait to do it again. But there was like a peer pressure, for them
Mm.
to continually show up and kind of stoke her fire. What I'm saying to you is that at the end, um, when she passed, she had a room full of people, relatives, friends. There were almost 30 of us in hospice at the hospital
Mm.
when she finally cashed out, as we used to call it.
Mm.
Uh, and at that moment, we were all there consoling each other as much as we were consoling her. But each one of us had had our opportunity to not be good enough, to needing her more than she needed us, and all of these other things that were constructs of conversation that really didn't actually exist.
Mm.
And had she ever listened to Wayne Dyer when she was in her 20s instead of in her 60s, her life would have been amazingly different. You know what I mean? She was really starting to get it,
Mm.
when the clock ran out. And that's what I choose to remember, not the previous 45 or 50 years where things didn't work, and there was always siblings that were being pitted against each other, and who made the most money, and the huh.
Mm.
And when it really got real during the last 3 or 4 months of her life, and my brother and I were there with her every single day. My wife was there. Dave's wife was with her too. Um, we really got to see what kind of a human being she was in the darkest hours, in a lot of pain. And you
Mm.
know what I found there, Seamus, was something quite beautiful. I want to
Mm.
say that what you're talking about, she finally realized with the last 3 months of her life, she actually was enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it
Which is
took her to
fantastic.
get.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pity it took so long, but it's fantastic that you got there. Like I was on the way to getting there. Like it's fantastic. Like yeah.
Amen, brother. And I
Mm.
think if anyone had ever had the chutzpah or the intestinal fortitude or the backbone to just stand in her face and say, what you're
Mm.
doing makes absolutely no sense, and people
Mm.
don't have the guts to tell you.
Mm.
It wouldn't have been a pleasant conversation to begin with, but sooner or later, maybe she'd have had 15 or 20 years. But you know what? Many people go their entire lifetime and do not
Mm.
get to experience what you've shared, Seamus.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
never get to that place where their head is clear and they do know, beyond any certainty of or any modicum of doubt, that they are enough.
Mm, exactly, and that's the primary motivation. I mean, that's the reason, the common theme, I think, for all of us who've written the book, Simply Becoming, is around the idea of this gift of allowing yourself to be yourself
Yeah.
and to challenge the narrative, that you've told yourself, like we've talked about earlier, the beliefs that are so powerful that you feel they're true, and there's nothing that's untrue or nothing beneath those. Like this is me, this is how I am, this is my life, and this is my lot. And it's a shame to think, through what we've just described, like that we would go through the full all the experience of life without experiencing all the experiences there is to experience, because we just go through a limited set of experiences based on this belief that hides so much. Like it's like the iceberg, like the tip of the iceberg. We live on the 1/10, back to the pyramid analogy, almost back to the piece that's visible, and we never get to explore or uncover anything that sits beneath the waterline. Like, and yeah, your mother began to experience that. I've experienced more and more of that, and we never. I think we'll get to the bottom of what's underneath the water, the full capacity of the beauty we all have within ourselves, the depth of what lies beneath, because we're so stuck in the beliefs that we see above the waterline. Like, you know what I mean? And I think it's an incredible journey. Like, that's what's coming through the book. We've all written about what's going on underneath and the liberation that comes with going there and engaging with it and welcoming those things that we felt we just couldn't engage with before.
I'm actually getting a mental image of that iceberg flipping upside down, and now
Yeah,
the
yeah.
5% is below the water line and all the rest of it is up top.
Yeah, that's what the beauty is. Like, and it's
Yeah.
funny we talk about pyramid as well, because that goes back to a kind of another analogy, like around the groundedness of the bottom of the pyramid. Like, there's no tipping over a pyramid, as you described earlier. And that is kind of the essence of our being, basically, that we kind of that we don't honor, because we're so busy at the top of the pyramid, at the identity and of the transient identities that go on at the top there. The ego is only a small part of the top of the pyramid, but the beauty we have as individuals is buried deep within us and ground us in our core essence, basic at the bottom of the pyramid. And yet we live a lot of our lives trapped by the superficial, limited ego at the top of the pyramid. Like, and it's a lovely reminder again of observing, of I'm living, these identities feel so real. I'm the father, like, this is how I must act in this situation, as the father, as the leader, particularly in business, as the leader. I've got to get the plan done. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And the ego is in total command, and with a total disconnect from, our true essence of who we truly are at the bottom of the pyramid.
Lovely.
And I think that a few things happen. I mean, at least in my own experience, living in the top of that pyramid or the tip of the iceberg, and then the whole top above the water is sheared off by life, by some sort of tragedy. And then all of a sudden, you have to, it's almost like you have to reevaluate. You have to totally, you know, begin again, or find yourself again, or know what is in the upper part. And the only way to do that is to go deep. I mean,
Mm.
I don't really know that, because otherwise you're rebuilding from basically nothing,
Mm.
and so then all of a sudden the whole idea of questioning those beliefs, or looking deeper than what's below the surface of the water, becomes much more aware, probably because when you were in the superficial area, you had really kind of no conscious awareness of what you were building. You were just building, it's that
Mm,
let's go with the flow, or let's just go with what's expected of us. And we're not really
Yeah.
conscious of, of what we're doing. And then all of a sudden, when that whole, when all that you are is kind of sheared away, then all of a sudden, for some, that's the opportunity. I mean, it doesn't feel like an opportunity when it happens, but it is the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm getting a sense of again the clothes that you put on that don't belong to you and they don't fit.
mm,
However, you spend your entire life defending those clothes, and when they're finally stripped off of you and you're naked, standing there trying to decide what's important, and then you go, maybe nothing. Let's try nothing for a little while and see how that goes.
I think that nothing is it's a very, for most people, me included, I think that's a very challenging place to be. It
Hmm.
feels very, well, one is you feel very vulnerable. And just like if you use the clothing analogy, you feel very exposed.
Yeah.
mm.
And then all of a sudden it's like, okay. And as you try things on, and certain things fit, I mean, that kind of reminds me of, I years ago I went to a factory in the Berkshires, and they take remnants they get people and they create clothing out of the remnants. I mean, they're spectacular, but it's having like a plaid patch of something with knit of something else with, I mean, and they're beautiful, but they're all very like, and they're kind of stitched together very oddly and everything. And they make different things. They make clothing, they make sweat, but they make a lot of other stuff too. But it reminds me of that. It's kind of like you try on a piece of clothing, and you're like, okay, this fits. And then it doesn't matter whether it matches with this other piece of clothing or not. If you try that on and that fits, maybe you add it in, just like, so it becomes this kind of customized suit that you can wear that maybe is a series of mismatched, looks like a mishmash, but
Yeah,
it's
it's back to what, and I think it's back to what it's back to feeling like, and what's you, and honoring like that feeling. So rather than living at the top of the pyramid, you're coming back to a place that you create space to allow yourself to not process the head information like the data of the external comparisons, but you're coming into accessing. This is what Susan David often speaks about: is awareness and noticing, and and noticing what you're feeling and getting curious with where is that feeling coming from, because before you would have just dismissed it maybe, but with observing, you're actually beginning to observe. I'm noticing that I'm feeling happy. I'm noticing that I'm feeling frustrated. I'm noticing that I'm feeling whatever, and that creates a beautiful space of honoring. And that's my own personal experience. And Susan David talks about this a lot around that term. I am noticing that I am something, rather than I am sad, I am frustrated, I am angry. Which and that simple phrase of separating yourself from the emotion, I am noticing that I am X, Y, or Z. It's such
Yeah.
a powerful process, because it allows you to become the observer rather than being caught in the midst of whatever is going on. And it kind of reminds me, and what you mentioned there as well reminds me of that podcast you shared with me last week with Tara Brack and the one you feed. It's that question about what really matters, and kind of when you're out at the top of the pyramid, and when you're in this space of coming back into asking a question like, what really matters? It's a great way of kind of helping you to kind of check and assess. Well, when I'm up here in the ego and doing the things that I feel I have to do, and then ask a question like, with observing and with care and compassion, like, from that space, from the inside, from the bottom of the pyramid, that can be a lovely way of beginning to kind of really level set on, this, the superficial nature of how really important is being at the top of the pyramid, being right and getting all these things done, versus the opposite end, the bottom of the pyramid, where I feel connected and at ease, and I feel, this just feels right, and this just feels liberating. And through that question, I think, is a great door opener, into through heart as well. Like, I love heart math as a process, like breath as the master regulator of opening the door to heart, to ask a question like from heart, what really matters. I think that can be such a beautiful process to help people to kind of really level set and reset. Who even people who are living, a lot of the time up at the top, at the high end of the pyramid, take a couple of deep breaths, begin to notice, and then maybe begin to ask yourself, well, what, at the end of the day, like maybe your mum maybe asked herself that question as well, as you described earlier, Bill, what really matters, like, and that can be, provide great insights, I think,
Mhm.
What I like about that is, we can substitute any kind of graphic metaphor that we would like to, but most people speak in very arrogant, very antagonistic, using terms like "you kill me," you've murdered me, I die every time you say that. I mean, this kind of language has gotten to be too much of a fad, and I think that we have a generation of people that live there.
Mm.
They actually think that that's really what's happening. We have uh, where speech is violence and violence is not. There's the breakdown that's going on here is people who have no strength of character to ask a question, and just kind of like, for the heck of it, what are we building? Are we building
Mm,
anything, or are we just tearing things down? And I watch this kind of behavior from afar. I don't know very many people really who behave this way, but I don't live in the middle of the city and I don't see a lot of the things that are going on, but I do hear from people sentences coming out of their mouth where they're talking about what's going on, and what they're saying about it is not in their own best interest. And I
mm,
don't have any idea at all what would cause somebody to give up their sovereignty and start saying things that A, they don't believe in, and B, they know is not good for other people. And from my standpoint, if there's one or two people that listen to this and start to hear themselves a little bit differently,
mm,
what a powerful place to kind of stand, as you're saying, at the top of the pyramid or wherever you are. If you ever just stop and think about what you're saying and how it makes you feel, are you creating life or are you extinguishing it? Are
mm,
you creating love and energy, or are you putting an end to it? Um, I don't know. Most of the people that I know, if not goaded, by their peers, the peer pressure, and not
mm,
people telling you what to do. It's just that they're modeling a behavior that is really not good for children and other living things.
mm,
And you don't have the intestinal fortitude to either get up and walk away to another conversation, or be a champion and ask a question that challenges, what are y'all doing?
mm,
you
mm,
know what is it that we're doing here? And that's kind of like the outward question of asking yourself that when you notice that what you're thinking may not be true.
mm.
And can you live with the consequence that this is something that by challenging it, you get to invent a new you in the next moment?
And I think that the important part of this, and it's really important, Bill, this is a really important discussion because I think um, before you get to the state of challenging it on the outside, you've got to be comfortable with beginning to open the door to challenging it on the inside. And I
Yes.
think that, that opportunity is always available to us. And maybe even asking a question like, where am I sitting in the pyramid now? It might be a good starting point. And
Right.
then, when you begin to process that yourself or just assess within yourself without ever kind of going outside yourself,
Right.
kind of ask this probing question and ask yourself, what really matters to me? Like, really matters to me. When I allow myself to be honest with myself, once I kind of notice where I am within the pyramid, and then be open to asking, like, well, what, in my own space, authentically now, where am I within myself? What really matters to me? And then, once you begin to process that, you're opening a door, then maybe eventually, slowly but surely, to be able to actually have the courage. This is the word that comes up often over the past year with some of the work and groups that we've been in as well. The courage to actually even dip your toe outside yourself from the basis of asking those questions inside, then to be able to actually act on that in the outside world in a situation that you felt you couldn't have asked the question, the important question that should be asked, but you simply feel you can't. Like maybe like the engagement with your mum, like in the past, like
Yes.
you just there wasn't just didn't feel like there was the right time to ask the question. But I think that's what's coming to mind as you describe that process, like of building the foundation within ourselves, so we can ask and engage in the difficult conversations outside ourselves in very small micro steps. Like ask a small little challenging question first, and then see how that goes, and then ask a little bigger one, and then a bigger one, and then suddenly you're feeling the liberation of being able to ask and engage and share and honor your perspective and challenge another person's perspective without in a very respectful way, that you're respecting yourself and your own opinion, and you're respecting the opinion of another person. And that's where dialogue emerges, which Otto Scharmer often talks about in Theory U as well,
One of the things I love about what you've said, and like piecing different parts of the conversation together, the notion of separating your ego or your identity or anyone's identity, because anything you think of somebody else isn't true. All
Mm,
it is an assessment and a judgment that you've come up with. And if you could actually just start asking questions a little bit differently, instead of like, what's wrong with you?
yeah.
and then maybe get into it a little bit more and just like, so let me just check in with you for a moment. It seems like there's a feeling here or a seeming that what you're doing is helpful. And I have to report to you that I'm not experiencing that. Nothing to do with you, but how it's being done might be something we could talk about. Do you think?
Mm. Yeah, it's about how I'm feeling. What's land? This is how I'm feeling from what you've shared with me, rather than pointing the finger of blame back. You caused this, and I
Yes,
think that's what you're talking about. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. So the whole the culture of gaslighting, of all of those words that have nothing to do with what's good for the world and are about foisting a group think opinion on many people at the same time, causing people to be fearful of speaking out.
Mm,
uh, I don't know if I'm at the point in my life where I will judge whether or not I can even get anybody's attention for a minute or two, or if I'm going to be wasting my breath by saying anything to them. Oftentimes, I'll just give a little salute and say, "Well, let's see you around."
mm, mm,
I think, in conjunction with the group overthink is I think that people are overstimulated and, um, information bombarded. So I think that the combination of messaging all the time, like there is no, when Seamus and I talk about there is no downtime and no quiet space.
Yes.
There is constant information coming at us in some way or another all the time now. There's no space unless you intentionally decide that you're going to take space or
mm,
take time. And so I think the combination of sort of like that group, because it's a group message. It's basically a group message that's being like put out all the time. And people are just information, like they are almost like, I talk to people all the time. And it's almost like this idea like I'm too full at this point. Like I'm so full. And people need to like, I think you need to, it's really that step back,
mm.
and getting away from that, whatever, getting outside in nature, whatever way you do it. I don't care. There are different avenues to do it, but I think you need to step back because I don't think you start to ask those questions when the volume is too loud. It gets drowned out.
Or when the foundation isn't strong enough as well. And
Oh,
I think that's where the courage comes from, like the noise and the lack of kind of sure-footedness within yourself. And I think when you combine those, then you have a lot more, back to that word, clarity. Now I'm ready to honor my perspective and not doubt. This is where I came from in my early years. We talk going back to right at the beginning of our conversation today, is doubt and lack of confidence and lack of feeling that I'm worthy. But when you turn this full 180 around, then you begin to see, do you know what? My perspective is a gift to the other person. My perspective matters because when I share and have the courage to share what I really think, what really matters to me, this is a gift to the other person. They can take it or not, but I have an obligation to share my perspective. And that's what's been a game changer for me, from the
Yeah.
person that would never share or would think that their opinion doesn't matter, to actually, do you know what? I have to share. It's an obligation for me to share what I care about. And then the other person can decide or choose, back to that lovely word choice, whether they're going to be ready to listen, to engage, to allow the gift to nurture the dialogue that will emerge when both people are sharing authentically, listening authentically, and then allowing each other's conversation or each other's perspective to nourish the other and nourish the outcome of what would never have emerged if it didn't have the courage to share in the first place.
Well, what you get is, rather than two jukeboxes playing songs at each other, you actually get a co-creation that's
Yeah,
new.
yeah.
In many cases, it gives rise to a whole new set of conversations where things can be, you stand on the shoulders of this conversation for that, as opposed to speaking until the other person stops listening, or listen until you're waiting for your turn to speak.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's such a powerful force because it avoids escalation, unnecessary escalation, and
right,
misunderstandings when you listen. And then, how often have you been in conversations where you've misunderstood, and then the conversation just gets lost because you get derailed by an argument out of a misunderstanding. But when you're creating the space to allow the dialogue to emerge, like I completely agree with just what you shared. Like that's when the beauty emerges. Like solutions will emerge that would have never emerged when you're not creating that space.
yeah. There's this also a set of I think pretty good what I call crutch sentences in that type of a situation where you might be able to build an opportunity to talk about something. Like for instance, one of the questions would be to have in your quiver is let's see if there's anything at all we can agree on.
Mhm.
Let's back it up and see if there's something here, in this domain of conversation that you and I can agree on.
Mm,
Is that possible?
mm,
So when you can get to the point where you can separate what a person is saying from your perception of who they are, you have a whole new way to experience them. You have a whole new way to engage them so that you're actually building a fire escape, and in a fight, the building's on fire and everybody wants to get out, but they're clawing each other to get to the closest window so they can jump. And in many
mm,
cases, it doesn't turn out well. And
mm,
actually,
But
in
I,
some families, people stop talking to each other for years and years and years over a failed conversation.
mm,
but I think the other thing that has to happen, and maybe I missed this and what you just said, Bill, is that I think there has to be an understanding of where that person is coming from. If we can,
Yeah.
there has to be some element of on your part, and then like, and the reason I say that is because I think it brings in that element of compassion and understanding, which I think is required. And so we have to have at least some feeling, or even asking the person if they come up with, well, how did you come to that? Like, why do you believe that? Like, those types of questions, because I think that part of that misunderstanding comes from the fact that we don't really understand where they're coming from. And so all of a sudden we're making judgments, let's say, quote unquote,
mm,
judgments on what they're saying without truly understanding where that originated from. With the fact that, like when somebody talks about, like, well, subways are unsafe. Well, I took subways for 30 years and they were fine, from me. But what's that being based on? Are they basing it on what they read? Are they basing it on a personal experience of some encounter that they had on the subway years ago? And so is getting more clarity as to where they're coming from when they say something and they
Yes.
mm,
make a blanket statement. And then all of a sudden there is more room and more space. Well, I could understand that you had that experience, and that's right. I'm really sorry you had that. And I can totally understand why you would then have that belief that, or come out with a statement like, subways are not safe. Because based on your experience, that's true.
mm.
So I think that nuance is
Yeah, and
important.
exactly. It's creating space, I think, from observing. Again, back to some of the key themes you've talked about. Like when you're creating that space, you're creating space for perspective, another person's experience and perspective you don't necessarily agree with, but that you would have shut down before. But now
Right.
you're creating the space to actually allow them to share why they have that perspective or that thought. And then that's where, the dialogue can emerge that wouldn't have emerged before because you have shut them down and said, no, I don't agree, you're wrong. And then, no, I'm right. And again, when you are allowing them to kind of expand upon why they believe that, okay, I can see now why that, you know, why now my perspective has grown out of, your experience. I can see now a different perspective that I simply couldn't see before. And that's a beautiful place that goes back to the power of dialogue and creativity and solutions that emerge that would never have emerged if we weren't creating that space to honor another person's experience and perspective. So again, it's amazing what can happen out of that space where there's mutual listening and mutual respect, even for perspectives that you don't initially agree with, but then through dialogue you can make better sense of, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we are just dipping our big toe into this conversation. And just like that, another hour of our life has evaporated into, well, hopefully into an area where it makes a difference for some people in terms of accessing empowerment or creating it in their own lives and sharing it with
Mm,
each other. And that's really where transformation comes in. If you have a situation as we're discussing and people are not agreeing with each other, how do you cause that to go from discord, distrust, and distaste to everyone is listening,
mm,
everyone is expressing, everyone is valuable?
mm,
And what does the world look like, from that vantage point? Interesting perspective. What I really appreciate that you shared today, from your book, um, I'm Becoming. Is that the name of the book?
Simply becoming.
Simply Becoming. Okay, simply. That's a good place to start. Um, I have a feeling that if you were to take a poll, you'd find a lot more people who were suffering under the not good enough rap for a good portion of their life, if not still there.
Oh yeah. Mm, mm,
And what I really appreciate that you're sharing, and I'll just share one more technique that a man who I interviewed for Simple Questions for 100 People yesterday. His name is Joel Hulk, and he's a multi business owner, very interesting human being. He was born in Argentina. He was raised on a kibbutz for about 16 years in Israel, and then he came to the United States. And what he finally decided at some point was he needed to have an opportunity to just turn everything off for 1 hour a day with
mm,
everything that was going on in his life and all the people that were counting on him for leadership, et cetera, et cetera. He scheduled the same hour every single day, turned everything off, took no calls, took no interruptions. And that hour was where he reconstituted himself and made himself whole to be able to go back to the rest of the day and take on whatever
mm.
came.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And I think, if you and I adopted the same kind of sovereign care for ourselves and just
Mm,
create this opportunity, not to put more in, but to let some out,
mm,
and just give yourself that opportunity to recreate, reconstitute, and rededicate. So,
yeah. Amen. Yeah.
so any kind of wrap up thoughts that you may have, Seamus?
For me, like, I suppose my primary motivation now is to encourage everyone I know to challenge the dogma. Go back to Lipton, like challenge the dogma of your beliefs. No matter how
Yeah,
strong a belief is or how strong a perspective is, create space to notice what's going on within yourself and to check the veracity of those beliefs that come from the head primarily, maybe, and get into the heart and use, like you just described, make some space, create deliberately, intentionally create some space just to feel and notice what's going on in the lower part of your body and what's going on underneath the waterline. That's my invitation, and that's the core invitation in the book as well. Is to create space to notice and honor, and experience what happens out of that simple practice, I guess.
it's just perfect. Jan, how about you?
Yeah, I'm complete. Like I always love these conversations. Just always feel so complete afterwards, and they're always such great reminders because no matter where we are, um,
Yeah,
it is a lifelong journey. All these things, and so on Friday on my audio event, and Seamus is always on, and we love having him because he always has such valuable things to share. It was about remembering, about the fact that a lot of it is that we forget, and so we have to be reminded, and that's our experiences in life. They are there to remind us, even if we don't want the reminders.
Mm-hmm.
yes. when we get to a certain place in life, we learn to take our medicine and smile about it, right?
Right. And we just have to, it's like, okay, thank you for the reminder.
Well, I completely appreciate both of you, and thank you for being on our podcast, Seamus. Jan, thank you for always introducing me to amazing human beings from all over the world, And I think where Seamus is in Ireland, there are some folks over there that can probably use your thinking in a very powerful way.
Yeah, I'm delighted, and thank you so much for having me on. And thank you, John, for again making the introduction. And yeah, more than happy. And if people want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn, so just look up Seamus Power, Powering Health, and they'll find me there if they want to connect.
Perfect. Simply Becoming. Try it out. It's a pretty easy read, as a matter of fact.
It's a lovely read.
Would you like to make our invitation for this week?
Oh, sure. So as always, we always close with just think about your contact list. So we'll go a little tech today. Think about your contact list and think about if there's anybody in there that you can reach out to just let them know that they matter and that you're really happy that they're in your life and that you appreciate them.
Absolutely fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll with my partner in empowerment, Jan Jeremias, and our new friend, older friend for Jan, but Seamus Power. And thank you for sharing yourselves today, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.